Hi guys, and thanks for joining me today. In this video I am looking at ultramarine blue. Ultramarine blue is quite a common paint and colour to have in one's palette, and people have different opinions on what they like in their ultramarine blue. So here I am testing out 13 different paints from 13 different brands, all ranging from student quality to professional to handmade. I'm leaving them unlabeled while I'm swatching. I will put the names underneath later on. For this part of the comparison, it will be blind. So the brands that I'm using in no particular order are 3 handmade paints, which are from Pruche, myself, and eventually Everything Mixes from Ame. The other paints I'm using are Artist Loft, Royal Langnickel, Rembrandt, Old Holland, Turner's, Cotman, Whsmith, White Knights, Winsor and Newton, Scholastic, Jackson's, I believe that's it. So I'm painting out each swatch, seeing how well they granulate and the tone of the colour. I've also put a line there to see how opaque each one is. All ultramarine blues should be fairly transparent. Ultramarine blue personally is not a colour, it's on my palette, but I don't personally use it quite a lot, as it's quite difficult to find a use for it because when mixing you don't want to use it for portraits or anything like that. It was helpful really in backgrounds, ocean scenes and sky scenes. Now what I'm looking for here is a good dark blue colour with good granulation. Ultramarine blues vary on granulation depending on the brand, and also the hue as well can vary quite a lot. Apart from a couple of the brands, all the ultramarine blues tended to do an okay job. There weren't many that were disgustingly horrible apart from 1 or 2, which we'll get to. I haven't got too many ultramarine blues from a lot of artist grades such as Schminker or Sennelier or Daniel Smith. I didn't have these in my collection. I didn't want to spend a fortune on a colour that's not used a lot in my palette. The current one that I have in my palette is actually my own homemade one. So I've let them all dry, and this is the dried and all of them here. This is what they all look like. I'm going to start writing their names on in a second, but looking at them already, there are a couple that stand out and a couple that really fail. Number 2 on the top line, 3 on the second, 5 on the second row, 4 on the top row. They all really sort of stand out to me, and some of them were quite surprising when I wrote the name. The ones that really don't look very nice are number 2 on the second row and the last one on the bottom row. They both look quite weak, and the one on the second row actually was really weak. It had a massive colour shift and is hardly anything like ultramarine. So I'm going to write the names on, leaving the sort of top 4 or 5 till last. So in no particular order, the first ultramarine blue, which I'm going to write out, is Winsor and Newton Scholastic. So this is an older paint of Cotman. It was produced back in the 60s and has not been in production for a very long time. It did okay considering it's a Cotman paint from a very long time ago. The next one is Turner's. Turner's is a cheaper watercolour brand, and this paint did fairly well. It's nothing wrong with it, but there's nothing that really shines about it either. There's a little bit of granulation and the colour is good. It's fairly cheap. The next one is Eventually Everything Mixes. This is a handmade one. This is an excellent ultramarine blue. However, it's not really comparable to the rest as it is ultramarine blue light. So it's a lighter version of the colour. Nothing wrong with it, but it's just a little bit different. The next one is Winsor and Newton. No, it's not. It's Whsmith. Whsmith is a stationery brand here in the UK, and it did fairly well considering it's probably a dye-based paint. The one next to it is the artist Loft one, and it's very terrible. As you can see, it's very chalky and a massive colour shift. Next, that was Old Holland. This was slightly strange because I'm a big fan of the Old Holland brand, and the ultramarine blue did not live up to expectations. I found it quite poor to the rest of their colours, which is also strange because most people like the Old Holland ultramarine. The next one down the bottom is from White Knights, and it's quite a nice electric blue. There wasn't a lot of granulation in it, it was quite smooth, and I guess it's okay. It comes in a whole pan rather than a half pan, and it's not available in tubes. Fairly cheap and economical. The next one is Winsor and Newton Cotman, and what I found surprising was this was a lot worse quality than the Scholastic one, which is shocking to me because Scholastic is much older. So the new formulas of Cotman are not as good. The last one there is Jackson's own brand. I actually got this as a cheap sample. I believe it was about £2 for a sample of about 10 millilitres. It was fairly good, fairly cheap. It's okay. It's a bit like Sennelier paint. So now for the top 4 or 5. The bottom in the other top ones are from Rembrandt. This was a good ultramarine, nice and deep blue, not bad granulation. It was quite nice, and it re-wetted quite well as well. Next up was a surprising one. This is the Ultramarine Blue from Royal Langnickel. They are a student-based paint, and they are supposed to be quite cheap. And I was really surprised by this. The Ultramarine Blue is really deep. There's nice granulation to it, and it's one of the darkest Ultramarine Blues I've tried out of these 12 or 13 colours. So real surprise there. And the last two are both handmade. Coming in at second place is Ebolt's Pruche Ultramarine Blue, and the number one is my own handmade one. The only difference really between the two is that mine granulates slightly more. In terms of hue, they're both pretty much the same colour. So mine is a little bit stronger granulating. It's down to the individual and personal preference, which one you would prefer. So that's how they all stack up against each other. As I said, apart from the artist Loft one, there's no real horrible ultramarine blue. They're all pretty nice. The handmade ones are definitely way above the rest. This may be due to the fact they are hand mould and they're not ground down as finely as, say, professional paint brands, so the granulation is a little bit better and the colour shines a little bit more. So thank you for watching. I shall see you in the next video.